So the outline is who is a leader. We're going to look at the context and challenges, courage and leadership. We're going to look at mindfulness as well, the values, using our values, and practical strategies and reflections. Oh yes, and also at Alexander College, I'm a French instructor. I forgot to mention that. So who is a leader? So let's begin by redefining leadership. It's not about titles. It's about taking responsibility for developing the potential in people and systems. So that means we're all leaders, instructors, advisors, students, coordinators, admin. So in indigenous knowledge systems, this is reflected beautifully. Leadership is shared, and it's about being in relationship with the land, with the community, with one another. So there is no hierarchy. It's more of an ecosystem where we notice that what someone does affects the whole. But indigenous wisdom teaches us that leadership is plural, it is dynamic, and it's embodied. It's a way of being. My ancestors are from Rainian Island. And if you don't know where Rainian Island is, it's a small island in the middle of the Indian Ocean beside Madagascar. And they harvested sugarcane through rhythm, through song, through movement. And so I carry these stories of both the colonizer from my dad, the colonized from my mom, and also of enslaved people and slave owners. So from that labor came the language Creole, and a language that is built from survival and freedom. And so I am here today, standing here, because of their resilience. And so in that spirit, I invite us to pause and acknowledge the land on which we are, has been cared for generations by the first peoples of Canada. So this land continues to provide what we need: grounding, nourishment, and breath. So especially in times of change. So perhaps now we can honor that by taking a long conscious inhale together and a slow, grateful exhale. So to breathe and remember to connect and to have that respect. This is me walking with my sister and two other friends, the Camino de Santiago. And as you can see, after walking 300 kilometers, we met these two other friends. And so you can see, as a leader, I am still in the middle of everyone, not in front. And it's actually the one that has a little bit less experience, is just starting her Camino, is just in front. So according to Timothy Clark, psychological safety is an environment of rewarded vulnerability. But what happens when vulnerability is punished by our workplaces or classrooms or our systems is that we disconnect. So Brené Brown says you can't get to courage without walking through vulnerability. That is the measurement of it. Who we are is how we lead. So there was a study done at Harvard by Harvard professor Amy Edmondson, who studied hospital teams to explore how teamwork affects the error rates in the hospitals. Surprisingly, the teams that met all the conditions for effective collaboration reported more mistakes. So at first, she thought this was a failure. And then she dug deeper. She went to meet each unit and had a talk with them. And what they said was that these teams seemed to have made more mistakes. That wasn't the case, actually. It was that they felt safe enough to report the mistakes. So these teams had higher psychological safety, which led to actually ultimately fewer mistakes, because they got to learn from their mistakes. So the takeaway is that teams thrive when they feel safe to speak up and learn from their failures. So ask yourself, what kind of environment are you creating as a leader in your classrooms, in your organizations? So if you want passionate employees, do you create an environment where they can express that passion? If you want employees that communicate effectively, are people afraid or not afraid to speak up? If you want reliable employees, then are you building trust over time? And if you want people who have initiative, then let's remember that what kills initiative is actually boredom and control. So I love neuroscience, so here I've included a little slide about it. So our presence impacts others. It affects our neuroplasticity. So mirror neurons in our brains mean that we literally sync up with one another. So whether I walked in the classroom and I'm stressed or grounded, my students will feel it. I'm sure you've had that experience. And it's the same in a boardroom meeting, right? So the energy travels before words do. Here I have a little picture with Barack Obama and David Cameron. So you can see they have the same stance, right? They're holding their jacket the same way. And so there's a mirroring that is happening. And usually because actions and behaviors speak louder than words, when we even look at parenting, for example, it's the same thing, right? The kids will act on learned behavior. So let's try this little exercise together. I'm going to ask you to take your thumb and your middle finger and then create a circle. It's a round circle. And place it on your cheek. So place it on your cheek. Yeah, on your cheek. Good. All right. So some of you fell for it, some of you didn't. Good. So actions speak louder than words. So why do so many traditional leader models fall short? Brené Brown says it's because of shame. So it's not guilt, it's shame. So guilt says I did something bad, whereas shame is I am bad. Okay, so we see in education, in parenting, in workplace expectations. So it keeps people small, scared, and silent. Little personal story. After I went back to Reunion Island after 21 years last year, my uncle, I have many uncles, and so I met one of my uncles, and I stayed only 1 week. So he was saying, what do you mean you're only staying 1 week? That's not enough. You should stay 3 weeks and spend a little time with everyone. And you're even choosing to go to the beach over going and spending time with your family. And then I responded to this. I said, well, do you know my life? Do you know my time? Are you paying my bills? Well, I responded all that in my head, of course. So instead of reacting that way, I paused and then I responded gently. And I said, well, I know you want to spend more time together. You're welcome to join me actually at the beach. And this is me doing my best. I only have 1 week here, so let's just enjoy our time here together. So that, in a way, is courage, and that's vulnerability. Okay? So courage is teachable. It's not about being fearless. It's about doing it anyways, even if we feel the fear. And leaders who cultivate self-confidence, they encourage others. So it creates a positive spiral, what we call in positive psychology. Brené Brown goes on to talk about the 7 myths of vulnerability. So some of these are vulnerability is weakness. This is especially seen in men. I don't do vulnerability. You can engineer the uncertainty and risk out of relational vulnerability, the same way you engineer it out of systemic vulnerability. So this means that if a neurosurgeon has worked 24 hours and is very tired, are we going to want him or her to operate on us? No. So that's the difference between the two. It's about saying, I can't, I'm very tired. So that's systemic vulnerability. Trust comes before vulnerability. And vulnerability is disclosure. And then my favorite, I can do it alone. So here, I have a personal story. Actually, I'll talk about the personal story first. So 2 years ago, my sister and I walked Camino de Santiago. So it's pilgrimage in Europe. And one day we had an argument, so we walked apart. And I insisted, I didn't know there was a forest coming up. I was 30 minutes behind her. And I insisted I could cross it by myself, even though I was actually scared. So she called me. And she says, "Hi, I'm going to wait for you at the entrance." I said, "No, keep going. I'll do it by myself. Keep going." She called again. I said, "No." And then when I got there, she was waiting. So she knew that I needed her. And that experience taught me that something very powerful. So real courage isn't pretending you're fine, right? It's not it's allowing to be supported. And that on that journey, support came from my sister. It came from people I met, strangers I met, a passing truck that was honking and pushing us to move forward. So that's how it came. Have a little clip here by Brené Brown. Which one is it here?
Scarcity culture, I think, is best understood with a simple question of never enough. Never good enough, certain enough, perfect enough, relevant enough, never extraordinary enough. So what we do in response to scarcity culture, I think all of us every day, we wake up in the morning and we armor up. And in doing so, I can protect myself against the things that hurt the most. Judgment, criticism, fear, blame, ridicule. I'm going to armor up. I think the troublesome thing about doing this is that it doesn't really safeguard us from pain, but it does prevent us from accessing the things that vulnerability takes us to. Vulnerability is the path to love, belonging, joy, intimacy, trust, innovation, and creativity. But I would argue one of the greatest casualties of invulnerability is this: empathy.
Which leads us to mindfulness. So mindfulness is more than just closing our eyes. It's about presence, and being in the present moment. It's about being sensitive to our environment, context, and perspective. So being mindful is mindless. Being mindless is an example of being trapped in a single perspective, for example, of being governed by the same rules, the same routine over and over again. As a yoga therapist, I connected back to the breath and to the different bodies, the koshas they're called in Sanskrit. So we have the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual bodies. In education, mindfulness helps us stay grounded during burnout. It helps us take those pauses and those breaks that we need. During tech fail, something happens in class. Oh no, what am I going to do? During tough student conversations that we need to have, or with our colleagues as well. It activates our prefrontal cortex so that we make clearer decisions instead of using our reptilian brain. And this brings me to a quote by Viktor E. Frankl, who was a neurologist, a psychiatrist, and a holistic Holocaust survivor. He says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. And here we have reached values. So courage is not about just being bold. It's about taking actions based on our values. And do you know your top 2 values? Can you name your institution's values? So when I took this course, they asked that, and I was like, actually, I'm not sure, right? So a lot of people don't know their institution's values. So in moments of conflict, decision-making, and in difficulties, what I ask is, does this align with my values? And if it doesn't, then to redirect. So using that really as our compass. Does this define me? Is this who I am at my best? Is this a filter that I use to make hard decisions? Here, the values are our guiding stars for our lives. So, as I mentioned, what are the values of my company? What's also very important is that strong values drive us to do what is right and not what is easy. This I always remind my students, especially when they lack putting effort into their work. And then in a company, there's also this having trust, right? So building trust with colleagues, with the students. And so Brené Brown has this braving acronym she uses. So B is for boundaries. So what's okay and what's not okay. Reliability, doing what we say we will do. Accountability, which is owning our story. The vault, which is the protecting our story. So when someone shares a story with you, knowing that it's a privilege that they actually are sharing it with you. Having integrity, so living in your values. Non-judgment, so being open. Of course, we have many judgments. This is human nature. But staying open and curious. And then generosity, so giving the benefit of the doubt. She calls these making generous assumptions. So it's if someone cuts you off in traffic, oh, well, maybe they cut me off because they have to get to the hospital. Maybe they, who knows what's going on. So one thing to practice is to think about a time at work when you experience a setback and go through this braving acronym to understand how that experience may have impacted your self-trust. Okay, and I'm almost done. So here I have some practical tools as well. She uses this language called rumble language, which is when you're trying to have a difficult conversation with someone, she calls it rumble, to set that up. And so some of the things to use, some of the language to use is the story I make up. Oh, I'm curious about, can you tell me more about this? Of course, the attitude in which you use it depends, right? If you say, well, help me understand this, right? It's not going to work. Help me understand, right? With some compassion. And so maybe during meetings, having check-ins, right? Check-ins at the start of the meeting. How is your energy today on a scale of 1 to 5? To understand where everyone is coming from. At the end of meetings, what went well? What's one thing we can grow on? Having permission slips. So that can look like, today I give myself permission to have fun, even though I have so many responsibilities and things to take care of. Right? And just carrying that so that I remind myself of it. Is that permission to be human? You can do breathing, right? They have what we call in the West, they call it box breathing. It's actually called Samavritri Pranayama, which is having the equal breath. Like so 4, inhale, hold 4, exhale 4, hold 4. There's this one I learned, the turn and learn, I really loved it actually, on Post-its. So writing an answer to a question. So for example, what does excellence look like to you? And which behaviors demonstrate the value of excellence? So writing that on a Post-it, everyone in a meeting writes it down, puts it in the middle when it's time. So, and then what happens is that, because you may have people who have a higher, you may have people who have a higher level of influence, right? Or there's a power dynamic. So what this does is that it reduces the halo effect. So when team members see what the person with the most influence in the room sees here, they're not going to see it, right? They're not going to know who put what. And then everyone will have their own thoughts as well. And they're not going to, what she calls, go on the bandwagon. So not everyone is going to say the same thing. So it's a really cool tool. Then there's having quarterly team values reflection. And feedback is a whole thing on its own. Giving feedback, so having frequent, authentic, specific, and timely feedback. And then, of course, operationalizing the values. So in conclusion, brave leaders, they step into the arena. Okay, they embrace vulnerability, even if it feels very uncomfortable. They choose courage over comfort. They lead with empathy and connection. And they know they won't always be perfect, right? But they show up anyways. So that's what I would like to share with you. I hope I intrigued you, and that every one of you, and that I have inspired you to lead somewhat effectively, whether as a parent, as an admin, as a faculty, as a human being, and then as students as well. And if you have further questions, please feel free to come talk to me, meet me outside as well. And I would like to leave you with one question. So what kind of leader, educator do you aspire to be during times of change?
Never school. Some things here. We have a few things added inspiring present. Passionate. And the bigger the word, that means the more people have added onto it. Thank you.